Make yourself comfortable. This is the first chapter. May this reading relax your mind and awaken your heart. My best friend Danny and I crept down the creaking stairway into his cool, damp cellar. Suddenly, an intuition flashed through my mind. I shouldn't be here. My heart pounded. In the middle of the room, a barbell holding weights of 250 pounds was propped on steel hooks. My classmate bragged, "My father lifts this every day." I was 7 years old, small and skinny, with short black hair, brown eyes, and a dark complexion. Touching the cold weights, I felt tiny. Danny turned to me. "Richie, I'm going to show you a big secret." Putting his index finger across his lips, he whispered, "Promise you won't tell anyone." He climbed up a shelf, reached high into a rafter, and came down with a brass key. Then, leading me to a wooden cabinet bigger than we were, he unlocked it and swung open the doors. He pointed to a stack of magazines. "Go ahead," Danny smiled. "Look at one." I did. It was filled with photos of naked women in amorous poses. My little body froze. Never before had I seen what was under a girl's clothing. It looked so strange and forbidden. "Neat, huh?" Danny asked. I nodded my head, unsure what to say. Flapping the magazine shut, I shoved it back into the cabinet. "Wait till you see what's in the drawer." He pulled it open, exposing 2 pistols and several hand grenades. "My father always keeps the guns loaded, and the grenades are real." He handed a grenade to me. "Here, hold it." Holding the cold, heavy metal, I shivered. "This is pretty neat," I mumbled, trying to hide my fear. I placed the weapon carefully back in the drawer. "Richie, wait till you see this." Danny pulled open 2 doors inside the cabinet, exposing a sort of altar. There, a framed photograph held a figure whose eyes stared ominously into mine. Horrified, I found myself face to face with Adolf Hitler. 2 armbands embroidered with Nazi swastikas had been draped ceremoniously on either side of the photo, and below hung a dagger with a shining swastika embossed in its handle. My heart sank. Hideous images flashed through my mind. I had often heard my elders speak about the recent slaughter of our relatives at the hands of the Nazis. My grandfather's family had never been heard from since 1941, when the Nazis occupied Lithuania, our ancestral home. Danny whispered, "This is a secret, but my parents hate you." A wave of heat rushed from my stomach to my throat. Why? What did I do? "Because you're a Jew. They say you killed Jesus." What? I stood paralyzed. What I was hearing just didn't make sense. My father says that even God hates you. The heavy footsteps of his parents creaked through the ceiling above us. I didn't know if I should run, hide, or cry. "Do you hate me, Danny?" "No, you're my best friend." "Because you are a Jew, I might hate you when I grow up. but I hope not. My mind went blank. Locking the cabinet, Danny led me upstairs to the kitchen table where his mother was waiting, with 2 plates of vanilla cookies and 2 glasses of cold milk. She smiled tightly. A loud creak in the floor announced the entrance of Danny's father, a stocky man with a square jaw, graying crew-cut, small piercing eyes, and a half-smile that gave me chills. I felt utterly vulnerable in his presence. Could the cookies be poisoned? I now thought, but what could I do? I was afraid not to eat too. Eat, Richie. What's wrong? His mother challenged. I struggled to hide my misery as I ate the cookies. With each bite, I prayed to God to protect me. Pale as a ghost, I walked home. At that age, I had little power to reason. I was simply hurt, and badly. My mother greeted me with a gentle smile. She was standing in the kitchen with an apron around her waist, rolling out dough across our circular dining table. I'm making apple strudel for you, Richie, your favorite. Mom, I asked, does God hate me? No, of course not. God loves you. Her eyebrows tensed as she placed her rolling pin on the table. Why do you ask this question? I was afraid to tell her. I don't know. I guess I'm just curious. To avoid further questions, I ran upstairs to my bedroom. I believed my mother. I believed that God loved me. Lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, I struggled to come to grasp the contradiction of love and hate, both connected to the same God. In the innocence of childhood, I secretly prayed in my thoughts or in a whisper. I'd mostly pray in bed, until I fell asleep. When I prayed, I felt a sense of shelter, and that someone was listening to me. I believed God heard me and was with me. Still, I had many questions about this divine being. Who is this being called God? I often wondered. Is he like an enormous cloud, or a shadow, nearly invisible? Or is he a friend who hears my every prayer, so real that I can almost touch him with my thoughts? I wondered. My parents, Gerald and Edel Slavin, I hope to learn how to pronounce their names more authentically as we continue our reading, were not particularly religious in a formal sense. Rather, they expressed their faith in God through their gratitude, generosity, kindness, and dedication to the family. They had grown up during the Depression, and ever since their childhoods had worked hard to support their families. While they wanted the best for their children, they were also careful not to spoil us, encouraging thankfulness for all we had and were given. In 1955, when I was 4, they had moved us from Chicago to the village of Sherwood Forest in Highland Park, Illinois, so they could raise my 2 brothers and me in an environment free from the pollution and dangers of the big city. Our tranquil neighborhood was set on flat terrain with abundant grass and trees. Children played in the empty lots and the quiet streets lined with houses that were almost identical to each other. Our little Richie is sweet, but so strange, my parents would often say. Why is he like this? I had odd habits. No one had any idea where they came from. Until I was 8 or 9 years old, I refused to sit in chairs while eating and preferred to sit on the floor, which my parents forbade. As a compromise, I was allowed to stand at the dinner table, even in restaurants. It was a common occurrence for waitresses to ask if they could bring me a chair. "He doesn't believe in chairs," my mother would reply with a shrug of her shoulders. While my parents took great care with their appearance, always dressing neatly and well, my mother had to wash my new clothes again and again until they looked old before I agreed to wear them. When they bought me new shoes, I scraped them with rocks till they looked worn. Whenever my parents had a new car, I squeezed onto the floor of the back seat until the car wasn't new anymore. Having better things than others made me feel embarrassed. I idolized the poor and downtrodden. Once my father took the family to dinner at a local country club. I disrupted everything by suddenly rushing from the table and out the door because I couldn't bear to be served by the busboy who was a classmate of mine. When my grandpa Bill found me sitting alone in our car, I explained my feelings. "It's all right, little Richie," he said. "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." My father's father, William Bill Slavin, left a deep impression on my life. His loving nature reflected the deep-rooted belief he had in his religion. I was fascinated to observe the quiet, unassuming way he tried to harmonize his old world traditions with life in America. Often, I'd catch him praying softly to himself at family mealtimes as the rest of us went about eating all around him. When I reached the age to enter Hebrew school, my father could not afford to send me. Still, he strived to give me the best he could. When I turned 13, he approached Rabbi Lippis to ask for a simple bar mitzvah to bless me. The stately, silver-haired rabbi readily tutored me in the basic prayers free of charge. One day I asked him, "Rabbi, could you explain to me the meaning of these prayers?" Tears welled in his soft brown eyes, and he embraced me with an affection I will never forget. In his old-world Yiddish accent, his voice cracked with emotion. He told me, "Little Richie, I'm satisfied with your sincerity to understand the meaning of this ceremony. It is becoming rare. Rabbi, how should I pray?" A wide grin expanded across his square, slightly wrinkled face. I felt sheltered by his affection, something I believed every child needed. "In the Talmud," he said, a book on Jewish law written by rabbis thousands of years ago, it is taught that it is better to pray to God for the strength to overcome temptations, difficulties, and doubts in order to do His will, rather than to pray for Him to do our will. On my 19th birthday, my older brother Marty gave me the debut record album of Peter, Paul and Mary, the folk trio from Greenwich Village. Their songs protested war, prejudice, and social injustices, but it was their lyrics referring to God that most stirred my soul. Leaning back to listen, I would close my eyes, drawn like a magnet to every word. The album's opening song began. Early in the morning, about the break of day, I asked the Lord to help me find my way. I'm afraid I don't know the tune, so I'll have to allow my improvisation. Again and again I listened, unaware that the simple prayer would guide the coming years of my life. In my quest for meaning, folk musicians like Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan spurred the rebellion erupting within me. But if folk music left me spellbound with meaningful lyrics, the blues struck my heart with raw emotion. The blues is all about feeling and yearning, pouring the grief of your heart into every note played or word sung, discovering relief and joy in that expression. Listening to a blues singer cry for a lost love, I would cry along for my lost love, though I didn't know yet who this was. While I was introspective, shy, and often worried about the feelings of others, my older brother Marty had a sixth sense for how to rile people. Wild like a monkey, he was called Monk for short. In 1965, when I was 14, I entered Deerfield High School, where Monk had just graduated. Seeing me, some teachers gasped, "Oh no, another Monk." From my first day of school, I was labeled Little Monk. The name stuck, although the irony of it escaped me until many years later. As a freshman, I was promoted to the varsity wrestling team. I cannot say that I was highly skilled, but when I applied my mind to something, it was with intense absorption. The coach and teammates had great hope that in the coming years I could be a champion. At first, I loved the challenge. Scholarships were mine if I pursued them, but something strange was happening to me. I began to crave a purpose in life beyond wealth, prestige, and the fads of society. How could I be content with the idyllic land of Highland Park when I knew that African Americans were imprisoned like slaves in the ghettos just miles away? How could I be satisfied with a wrestling medal when my older friends were being forced into the horrors of the Vietnam War? Haunted by such questions, I, along with my friends, questioned the very fabric of the life we knew. On a hunt for purpose, I burned with a passion for the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King Jr., poring over the words of Malcolm X and books on social reform. Along with my best friends, Bassoon and Gary, whom I'd known since we were 10, I got a job at a car wash after school and worked there full-time in the summer. It was hard work, but I loved it. Here we found ourselves working to the backdrop of soul music among older African American men from the ghettos of the south side of Chicago, a world away from the security of Highland Park. In the company of these men, who were beaten down by poverty, racial discrimination, and alcoholism, hearing the raw cry of a blues or soul singer stirred my heart. I was 15 years old and deeply troubled by unanswered questions. Then, when a close friend, only 16, died after his car skidded on the winter ice and plummeted into the frigid waters of Lake Michigan, I found myself wondering, who am I? And where am I going? It seemed that the whole world was skidding on the ice of uncertainty. In search of a sanctuary, I moved down to our basement and covered the walls with psychedelic posters that glowed under a black light. Fishing nets hung from the ceiling. Jasmine incense smoke hovered like a cloud. Sometimes I would switch on the flashing beam of a strobe light to heighten the dreamlike effect. In the privacy of my basement, I listened to the revolutionary music of the 60s. A Day in the Life by the Beatles churned my longing to seek a meaningful life beyond the superficial. When I laid back, closed my eyes, and listened to George Harrison sing, "Within You, Without You," I cried with the strings of his sitar for inner peace. Over and over again, I played Ray Charles' soulful rendition of Old Man River as I sat motionless and grieved for the plight of the downtrodden. When I listened to B.B. King, the mournful notes bursting from his guitar pierced my heart, and I wondered why sad songs made me feel so good. One late night, in the turmoil of questioning everything around me, I heard Johnny Rivers through my stereo headphones singing, look to your soul for the answer." I took a deep breath, looked up, and exclaimed, "Yes, that's it." Incited by the times, my close friends and I threw ourselves into the spirit of counterculture in the 1960s. As the minority in a school where conservatives, jocks, and cheerleaders predominated, we began to wear our hair long, to experiment with marijuana and LSD, and to generally rebel against the values of our parents' generation. But I was torn. I hated to disappoint anyone. I agonized over quitting the wrestling team and didn't have the heart to let my coach and teammates down. The school expected me to help lead the team to championships. The coach once declared to the team, "When little monk's determined to win, he's like a hungry tiger pacing the mat. He's champion material, but he seems to get distracted." Confused, I prayed for a way out. Soon after, in a prestigious tournament, I pulled my opponent down in the first 5 seconds of the match. The crowd roared, cheering me on, but I knelt as if paralyzed. My shoulder had been yanked out of its socket, and the bone ripped through the muscles of my chest. Pain stabbed through my body. At that moment, with the dislocation of my shoulder, my life was dislocated from a passion that had already died. Trembling in agony, as hundreds in the gymnasium looked on in shock, I silently thanked God. I was free. What I didn't have the courage to give up myself had been cast aside, I felt, by the power of destiny. Let's pause our reading of The Journey Home there for now. Thank you for listening. What a tremendous introduction to our story. Powerful storyteller. Our dear author is Little Richie, aka Little Monk, later to be known as Radhanath Swami. I can see why he was pressured to write the story of his life, already off to a monumental start. Well, I very much look forward to continuing this story with you as we read next time. Namaste.